Hello and welcome to Indian Standard Time. 2015 has been something of a roller coaster ride for India-Pakistan relations. Net, I'd say it's been a bad year. The prospect of dialogue appeared bright at one point. The two prime ministers met in Ufa and there was an agreement for the dialogue process to continue, starting of course with the issue of terror. A meeting was scheduled for the two NSAs, which finally never took place. Since then, it's been a further journey downhill as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned. And as of now, it isn't clear what prospects there may be for the new year when it comes to the future of this relationship. Joining me to discuss the state of India-Pakistan relations and also the internal dynamics of Pakistan is a very special guest, a familiar guest for IST, Najam Sethi. Najam, you have worn multiple hats. You're, of course, editor of Friday Times, editorial advisor to GeoTV. You've been the caretaker chief minister of Punjab, and, of course, former head of the cricket board. A keen observer of the bilateral relationship, and I dare say, of the internal dynamics. And let's start our discussion with a quick postmortem of the famous NSA talks, which never happened. The fact that the talks were scheduled in the first place came as something of a surprise to both sides. I think Ufa cleared the decks and everybody was very positive about this opening. But finally, when push came to shove, the two NSAs could not have their meeting. India accused Pakistan, Pakistan accused India. Where do you think the burden of blame lies in your view?
Well, I think two or three things happened at Ufa. And the first is that there was considerable American pressure on both sides to start talking.
You think that was the reason the two prime ministers?
I think that was the reason why there was no homework done
to
make sure that they didn't fail, number one. Number two, certainly in the case of Pakistan, my sense is that the Pakistani political establishment didn't really interact with or get a feedback from the military establishment because it happened so fast. So I think what happened in the end was that they did lay out a 5-point agenda, starting with the two NSA talks, which were then focused on terrorism. I mean, that was absolutely clear.
Yes.
And then I think when the Pakistanis got back to Pakistan, suddenly the media started talking about why are you not discussing Kashmir? And I think that became a crescendo. It just went up and up and up. And then it was assumed that the military establishment was unhappy that only focus on terrorism was going to be discussed. Although, mind you, currently the Pakistani position is that we are as much victims of terrorism as anybody else, if not more. And if you have some dossiers on what we've been doing to you in terms of proxy wars, well, we also have some dossiers. So I don't think that was an issue, which is why the Pakistanis agreed to discuss terrorism. If you remember earlier, the issue used to be discuss Kashmir or nothing else, and then your side started saying terrorism and nothing else. And this time, they were both are victims of terrorism, so they said, okay, you talk to us about terrorism, we'll talk to you about terrorism. This is a new dimension from the Pakistani point of view. So I think it was the Kashmir thingy which put the government, the civilian government in Pakistan on the spot, which is why I think then they ended up having to backtrack.
Okay. So in a sense, failure was preordained?
No, it wasn't preordained. You know, it's exactly the sort of thing that happened at Sharm el-Sheikh when Dr. Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Gilani from Pakistan met and they talked about everything. And for some strange reasons, the Indians at that stage agreed to bring the issue of Balochistan on the table, which is what the Pakistanis had been saying. You know, the Indian hand in Balochistan. And when Dr. Manmohan Singh came back to Delhi, he was blasted for allowing the Pakistanis to bring the issue of Balochistan in. So then there was backtracking all around. So I think I was talking to a senior Indian minister, in fact, in the current government. And he asked me about Ufa. And then he laughed and said, well, like, that's exactly what happened at Sharm el-Sheikh. We had to backtrack. Right. So both sides end up being hostages to a particular nationalist or some zero narrative in the media,
right.
Which is what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh and in what happened at Ufa.
Right. But given that Pakistan insists that it's a victim of terror, and Sartaj Aziz, in fact, at his press conference in Islamabad, on the eve of the summit, of the talks which never took place, held up what looked like a dossier that he said contains evidence. Why couldn't the Pakistani side have gone ahead, talked terror as the Indian side wanted, laid out its charges and gone back and tom-tommed that at home to say, look, just like India accuses us, we have laid our evidence too. Surely that wouldn't have detracted from the salience of Kashmir and the Pakistani point
No,
of
I
view.
think that is what the intention was. The Indians would put their dossiers, you give your dossiers.
And then you move on.
And then you move on. But I think since the Kashmir issue was raised by the Pakistani media, Sartaj Aziz felt compelled to say, yes, of course, when we go there, we'll talk about terrorism, but we'll also talk about Kashmir. Now, the thing is, the talks, that was, in my view, that was just a public statement. That didn't mean that Sartaj Aziz would come there and say, let's talk about Kashmir. My sense was the Indians overreacted. I think they should have just kept quiet and said, well, we are going to talk of terrorism, and that's what the agenda is. Let them come. And I know from internal sources that that is what would have been discussed, terrorism. They may have been just the oblique mention of Kashmir. The Indians could have just shrugged their shoulders and not responded. Sartaj Aziz would have come out and said, we've talked about this and talked about that. And they would have said, we've talked about this and we haven't talked about that. And that would have been the end of it. But the ball would have started to move. I think both sides, Pakistanis by saying, we'll also talk about Kashmir, and then the Indians hitting back and saying, no, we'll only talk about terrorism. I think both were under this pressure to talk, and so both found an opportunity not to be seen to be weak in some way or the other, and moved out.
And net, I mean, often we wonder how things play out now, but within Pakistan, would you say that the failure to get the NSA talks off the ground and the rather tense way in which the whole thing was called off has weakened the appetite for dialogue, weakened the constituency for peace in Pakistan?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can tell you from my personal conversations with very, very senior people, including the Prime Minister, that this government's policy of wanting to immediately start peace talks with your new government, there was some degree of discussion and disagreement with the military establishment. They wanted him to go slow. He wanted to move fast. Eventually, he was snubbed here. That's the perception there. And so therefore he had to now retreat. And so I think the appointment of a national security advisor, a retired general who's just retired, who's head of the Southern Command.
Nasir Janjua.
Nasir Janjua, held in great esteem in the military, a great political negotiator because he's been trying to bring the Baloch rebels back into mainstream politics. This is a military request which the Prime Minister has acceded. It's like saying, okay, I made a mistake vis-a-vis India. I was wanting to move too fast. The Indian government is in no mood. All right, I accept that. Okay, you deal with it now.
So Sartaj Aziz, who earlier was wearing two hats in a way, foreign policy advisor to Nawaz Sharif and national security advisor. So he's been divested of the NSA cap. And
well, Sartaj Aziz had a very peculiar, he was in a peculiar situation. He was NSA, he was advisor to, he was the advisor foreign minister.
Yes.
Because Nawaz Sharif is his own foreign minister. But with that you had Mr. Fatemi, who's also an advisor to the Prime Minister on Foreign Affairs, senior bureaucrat. Long family relations with him. So our problem was that we had a foreign minister advisor and another advisor on foreign affairs, two guys. They don't almost always see on the, see the same things. They're not always on the same page. And then you had the military, which wanted its point of view articulated pretty strongly. So Sartaj, in a sense, was caught in the middle. On the one side, Mr. Fatemi, and on the other side, the military establishment, and he couldn't handle it. So which is why he's been divested of one and told, okay, now you just look after foreign affairs. And NSA, I mean, the NSA is only relevant in terms of US and India, and that's it.
There was an interesting editorial in Dawn about the appointment of retired General Nasir Janjua as NSA, that in some way this represents a weakening of Nawaz Sharif's relationship. I mean, the equation between the civilian government and the military has shifted even more decisively in the military's favor. And they also speculated that Janjua now occupying the NSA's post will actually make the task of dialogue with India as and when it happens perhaps more difficult.
You know, Siddharth, there are two ways of looking at it. When Nawaz Sharif came in, he immediately decided to pursue the Musharraf case, the treason case. He had Musharraf arrested, stopped him from leaving the country, put him on exit control list, and Musharraf is still having to fend off those cases. The military was very upset. They don't like a former army chief being put on trial. And Nawaz dug his heels in despite advice that don't take any pangas, don't sort of step on the military. It's too early in the game. Just consolidate yourself. We have a history of civil military problems. There's no need to rile them up. And Nawaz was, no, I have to do what I have to do.
So settling a personal.
It wasn't,
browsing,
well, it
right?
was partly personal, partly, he thought, okay, what's
may
the
lead to a
point of
systemic
being,
remedy.
what's the point of having to rule if you can't really rule?
Yeah.
And why should I kowtow to the establishment always? I'm a popular person, I won popularly, I'm going to carry out my agenda. And the peace with India was on top of his list.
Right.
Even when in opposition or out of power, he constantly harped upon it and said, enough is enough, we are going to make peace with India and so on. So, but he stepped on the military. The military reacted very negatively. At that stage, the very people who are writing these editorials now saying that this is a weakening of the civilian government, handing over power to the military, they were saying, why have you taken this issue with the military? This is completely unnecessary. Focus on the economic development, focus on your things. Why are you unnecessarily ruffling their feathers? The thing is that my sense is that he backtracked later from the Musharraf thing, which is now in cold storage. And then he ended up having the army chief sit next to him and jointly take decisions. The net result of that has been the conspiracies against the civilian government, often hatched behind doors, in which politicians end up queuing up before military conspirators. Those have ended. And everything is up front.
So things are in the open as
So there's a great deal of stability, and it's Nawaz Sharif's India agenda has not taken off, and the military has been proven right. Unfortunately. So they said, all right, then you deal with it, because if I'm going to be criticized for UFA and so on and so forth, and so you might as well then handle it.
When you say military proven right, in the sense that they felt no forward movement would be possible, or
they felt that the civilian government in India was not ready to move forward with the civilian government in Pakistan. So they felt that in that case, why should the Pakistani government be humbled and shamed as though we are begging for peace? And constantly undermined by pro-military elements in the media and elsewhere.
But certainly the initial evidence from Delhi was very positive. I mean, for Narendra Modi to invite
it was very
for the
positive,
inaugural...
but people in India forget that at that time he was advised by the Pakistani Foreign Office that there's no need to, you can go there, sir, but just say hello, hi, and come back the same day.
Right.
Don't stay overnight for the...
Right.
Nawaz Sharif said, no, I will not only go for that, I will stay overnight, and then I want to have a bilateral
meeting. Yeah.
And in fact, some people in the establishment said to him, don't go at all. Bangladesh is not sending anybody for whatever reason. Right. So you don't have to send somebody. Let's wait and see how this government wants to unfold the agenda. Mia Sahib just rolled roughshod over everyone, said, no, I'm going. And he came here and he did that. The first, what the Pakistani media and the establishment says, his first humiliation was when your foreign minister suddenly held out a press conference which caught him off guard. And
the foreign secretary.
The foreign secretary. And he was very upset, but he still kept his cool. But when he got back, he was blasted. Right. They are saying this and you just kept quiet. What were you doing there? And since then, he's been on the retreat. He was hoping that, India-Pakistan trade would start, visa facilities, all the rest. Instead, the line of control is heated up.
Yeah.
And the perception in Pakistan, whatever your perception, the perception in Pakistan is that our military is not interested in destabilizing the border at this stage. We are neither promoting terrorism in Kashmir in the way at one time there was a jihad and so on and so forth. All that has ended. And everybody knows that.
And Musharraf made some pretty candid statements.
Absolutely. That is now a thing of the past.
Right.
And the other thing is the military has its hands full dealing with Taliban in FATA and negotiating with Afghanistan on these issues, and then dealing with Karachi and with sectarian elements in the Punjab. This is the first time the military establishment has taken on all these people who at one time or the other they had nurtured. So this is a big thing that is happening. So we are the military establishment is the last establishment that right now wants to heat up the border. So our sense was that it's your side that has heated up the border for internal reasons, which may have to do with your elections over here and so on and so forth, or for a particular constituency. Yeah. And your national security advisor's statements before he became national security advisor, Mr. Doval, they are grist for the mills. Very hawkish.
We've seen very old YouTube clips circulating as if they're fresh statements.
Yeah, but nonetheless,
offensive
defense, Balochistan, if you do this, you lose Balochistan, all that is hard stuff.
I mean, truth to tell, looking at the LOC situation from our side, it's hard to understand what possible reason the government of India would have to escalate either. So the fact that firing continues and there is tension, although things are a little bit better now, I think is a cause for concern. But let's shift gears a little bit, because one of the hats you wear is with the PCB.
Yes.
Now, you were in Bombay with Shahryar Khan.
Yeah, I went to Bombay.
About on the eve of, on the day of that infamous incident where Shiv Sena activists broke into the BCCI office and basically ensured that this meeting with Shashank Manohar never took place. What happened on that day?
Well, I mean, we were invited for talks. Talks have to do with this series that India and Pakistan's cricket boards have signed.
Yeah.
I signed on one side, and Mr. Srinivasan, who's the ICC president now.
And you're meant to start playing from next month, right?
Yes, next month we have a first series.
This is a formal agreement.
Formal agreement, and I'll give you a copy of the agreement. And if it is a positive decision, I tell you, Siddharth, this could be the trigger.
So an icebreaker of sorts?
It could be the trigger that, back to cricket diplomacy. We have seen it during Musharraf's time. We saw it during Zia's
exactly,
time.
Yeah.
And what better way for the two NSAs to find an opening, maybe you could send Mr. Jaitley or somebody to watch the match. And we could send Sartaj Aziz to be the chief guest, and they could chat on the sidelines, and maybe another opening can be created. Right. Because don't forget, we have the new SAARC summit coming up next year, early next year, and that's going to be in Islamabad. Yeah. So your government will have to decide whether they want to postpone that, which itself is problematic, or whether then your Indian Prime Minister will come to Islamabad. So I think it's best that we break the ice and get things moving, and cricket can be that great catalyst.
Right. It's my sense, however, that things have taken a pretty sharp downturn. I mean, in the sense that I think the government's view, perhaps, and we've seen this articulated in statements that senior ministers have made, that what the Shiv Sena did in Bombay is not acceptable, the way in which they treated Sudhindra Kulkarni, for example, who was going to host Kasuri's book launch, or the attack on BCCI, or even when Ghulam Ali's concert was cancelled, Devendra Fadnavis, the chief minister, wanted the event to go ahead and promise security, but Ghulam Ali decided that this was perhaps not tenable. But is it your sense, looking at what's happening in India from the Pakistani point of view, that the possibilities of people-to-people contact, which was always, in a way, what saved the India-Pakistan relationship from complete deterioration, that the possibility of that contact is also coming down now, and that the kind of exchanges we've seen in the past may become less frequent?
You're absolutely right. I mean, they've also been in the odd incident in Delhi, for example, along the same lines as Mumbai.
But what's heartening is that in this play which was interrupted, the audience all firmly stood up on behalf of the Pakistani performers.
You see, but look at the reaction in Pakistan. The reaction in Pakistan is, oh, so you want to go to India, you want to be shamed by them, and you're going there only for money. I see. You see, so that's what's putting people in Pakistan on the defensive, the people from the artistic community who come here to perform.
So they get portrayed as being mercenaries in a way.
Yeah, they get portrayed as being mercenaries and shameless.
Right.
In pursuit of greed, you go there, you're snubbed. People don't ask, how did the audience react? How did the organizers react? How did civil society react? Which is, your reaction has been wonderful. SS has been condemned universally here. But nonetheless, Pakistani media doesn't look at that. They say, why did you go there? If you knew you were going to be snubbed and attacked, and then you had to run away there with your tail behind your legs, this is ridiculous. So that's the sort of social pressure that is now being brought to bear on us. I mean, I have been invited to a lit fest in Mumbai. I had to write to the organizers to say, hey guys, I mean, do you want me to come or not? And they said, yes, we want you to come. We want to resist this. We are resisting this, and so on and so forth. But back home, my people are telling me that if you go there and the same sort of thing happens to you, you're going to be blasted in the Pakistani media for being, adding insult to injury. What is going on? So, this is the sort of thing that is happening, and you need to, at least if civil society is protesting, that protest needs to be loud and clear. The way you are protesting by returning your awards and so on and so forth, that's a form of protest that is finding an echo in Pakistan, and there's a lot of support for that. Great, people are standing up, civil society is standing up. But I think you also need to send a very strong message. And it's the government of the day that needs to send a message, nothing less than that. But that message has not been coming from your government.
But tell me, Sudhindra Kulkarni, making this very visible, in a way, show solidarity with Kasuri by going onto a podium with his face blackened, telling the Shiv Sena or other people who want to interrupt these kinds of events that I'm standing firm, I believe there should be contact. Surely that sends a positive message in Pakistan?
It sends a message that yes, there are people who are prepared to stand up
and take risks.
Take risks. But at the same time, as I pointed out to you, the people from our side who go there are seen to be, The other thing is, if you remember, even the ICC has crumbled in the face of this sort of pressure. They've had to pull out a Pakistani empire. They've had to pull out two Pakistani commentators, Wasim Akram and Ramiz Raja. It's not just the musicians. So, it's as though in a particular state you have this issue, which is now even compelling the international cricketing community to to take this onus on themselves in order to avoid any unpleasant incidents. This is not good.
We don't have much time left, but let me just move away slightly from the India-Pakistan and take advantage of your presence here. Nawaz Sharif's visit to Washington, there were great expectations. There was even speculation in the US that in Washington that the US may offer some version of a nuclear deal with Pakistan. That, of course, didn't happen, but there was plenty that I think would have given the Pakistani side some optimism that there is fresh life in the US-Pakistan relationship. Do you think that this visit was significant?
I think two things happened. Number one, the Americans were able to impress upon the Pakistanis and bring into their joint statement some of the issues that India had raised with America. You know, the issue of Lashkar-e-Taiba and so on and so forth. So I think that was a great American achievement in a sense, and the Indians can crow about it. But at the same time, I think what has happened is that the Pakistani relationship, which was going down, that downslide has been halted. So I'm not saying it's going to go up, but that has been halted. The Americans have agreed to give F-16 aircraft to Pakistan, which were on embargoed. The Americans have agreed to release $300 million on the coalition support fund that was embargoed. And more important, the Americans are willing to give Pakistan more support on drones and other things in terms of, you know, getting American troops to continue to stay in Afghanistan for 2 more years and pushing Pakistan to do more vis-a-vis bringing the Haqqani network into the table and so on. So I think there is a quid pro quo. Pakistan seems to be genuinely interested this time in an Afghan-led peace and will do whatever they can. The only problem is that they don't really fully control the Taliban. I mean, that's a misconception. The Taliban have never listened to the Pakistanis when the Taliban's own interests were not in accord with Pakistani interests. I mean, that I can give you hundreds of examples. So if you expect that the Pakistanis will drive out the Haqqanis and then risk the Haqqanis joining up with the Pakistani Taliban and creating havoc in Pakistan, they will not do that. They will continue to lean on them, to put pressure on them, and to make sure that the Afghan government is more willing and able to negotiate with them.
And Obama's decision to extend the deadline of America's troop withdrawal by 2 years.
Welcomed by Pakistan.
I mean, that doesn't alter Pakistan's equations or...
no, in fact, the Pakistanis have welcomed it because the last thing they want is the collapse of the Afghan government and then the whole area plunging into the same sort of civil war. That would create 3 things. Another stream of refugees. We already have several million Afghan refugees in the country. Many of them have now unknown to us. They're in all sorts of areas and could be sponsoring terrorism for all you know. And the second thing is that economically Afghanistan will collapse. That will put enormous strain on Pakistan as well. And the third thing is, of course, is Afghanistan will become a base area for export of terrorism to Pakistan, the Pakistani Taliban. So I think they're very pleased that the Americans have postponed their entire withdrawal. I think everybody is going to put their shoulder to making sure that in the next 2 years before the Americans leave, some sort of agreement is on the table. And I think the Pakistanis will be backing it all the way.
We're completely out of time. On that note, we'll have to end. Thank you very much for joining us again on IST.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Indian Standard Time. Do join us again next week with another guest. Thank you for watching.